This talk is more about the sort of journey that I've been on over the past few years to actually get to a point where you can be somebody who started a company that has gone on to wherever we are today. And I'll just kind of talk you through the perspective I have from the angle I have. So I didn't always speak in the Board Gash Energy Theatre. I spoke in shitty meetups. And I'm sure you can recognize them all. Me speaking to 4 people in a room and calling that a success, right? Because if I could get just one of them to use our product, it was a win. And genuinely, that's me in Berlin, and that guy facing away from us, he's a customer. You know, that's what it used to be like, exactly, right? And the company back then looked a lot more like this, right? It was a few of us in a room. One time we had an entire company, the entire team went out to Glendalough. That was the cheapest sort of holiday thing we could do, was just walk around Glendalough for the day. And in the bottom right, I'm sorry to say, was our office. It was going cheap, let's just say that. And then if you fast forward to sort of Intercom of today, it looks more like this. This is me speaking at a customer event that we held in San Francisco a couple of years ago. And this is me speaking at a Nordic Business Forum a while ago. And I know what you're thinking, and yes, I have lost a few pounds, thank you. It's like, obviously we've hit some sort of point of scale, and if you see Intercom today, we're like 30,000 paying customers, over 600 people, 5 different offices. It's been a bit of a journey, and that's what it's like today. And I guess what I'll talk about a bit is like, what's it all like? Now, whenever I try to answer the question, you know, what happened or how does it feel? The questions you get asked typically are like this sort of stuff. What's your top tip? Or when did you know? Or what was the biggest mistake? Or if you do it all again? Or will you do it all again? Or anything like that. And the thing that frustrates me with all those questions is they always trigger these corresponding popular answers. Work 996. This is the idea that you should work your ass off, right? Like 996 being this phrase that's become popular in Silicon Valley, where they basically say you should work 9 until 9, 6 days a week. And that's, frankly, absolute horseshit. You need to hustle. People say hustle all the time. And what they really mean is send emails to people, right? Sounds more attractive when you call it hustle. You need to crush it. You need to fail fast. You know, you need to fake it till you make it. And all this junk, right? And like, so you have like, what I would say is like, these are all the wrong questions. And these are all the wrong answers. And I think it's frustrating, but this is like the sort of culture, the sort of cycle of startup goss that we get in a sense. So maybe I'll explore what it's really like. Whenever founders like me try to explain a story about how the company came to be, they tend to tell you some sort of A to Z narrative. Like if you saw the movie The Social Network, it looked something like Zuckerberg went to Harvard, broke up with his girlfriend, and formed Facebook as a reaction, right? He sure showed her. But it's like absolute nonsense, right? That's not even remotely true, but it's just that was the straightest narrative they could give. The other problem with this, by the way, is when people talk about companies, they talk about like folks like me, whereas in reality, there's 599 people who are actually making Intercom happen right now. I'm actually not doing a lot, in case you haven't noticed, right? So you know, but when you look back, you tend to form this really clear narrative of course we were going to end up here. Of course, this is what it was going to be like, right? What you don't see is like all the different decisions that we made along the way. All of these different paths. A startup, or like life in general, is like a set of like multivariate decisions where you can start a company or not, or build this feature or not, hire that person or not. And that's, you know, that does not make for a good movie. But this ain't a movie, dog, as Jay-Z once said. So we take this, and the problem when we tell this narrative to you all, when we say, here's what it's like, you know, you go to Harvard and bang, billionaire or whatever, right? Is that, you know, people receive it and they try to break it into like a Gantt chart of like, well, here's the things I need to do, you know, and they form this as some sort of template for their experience. And much as like founders tend to like over-interpolate, where they're trying to like reverse engineer the logic that got them to where they are so that they sound even smarter. Like some of my best fiction that I read is Silicon Valley founding stories. But then similarly, other people tend to over-extrapolate, which is like they read information outside. They assume like if this, then that will apply to them too. So I'll do my best to sort of talk about what actually I do think happens in the middle, because I have no idea about the counterfactual. People ask me counterfactual questions all the time. Did you have to raise money? I don't know. Could you have stayed in Ireland? I don't know. I can give you like how I think about it, but ultimately I haven't a rashers because I didn't do it. Right? So I'm just guessing. I can't tell you basically how we work it out. So like what actually happens in this middle phase? Well, a personal philosophy of mine is that your life is ultimately a set of decisions and execution. It's things you choose to do and then how well you do them. And that is to me what life is. What do you do and how well do you do it? And we'll talk about these in reverse order. How well you execute is probably the biggest control variable, if you like, on your success in life, in startups, in relationships, whatever. And bear in mind, I don't mean execute as in kill in relationships. It's a separate thing. I think Derek Sivers is famous for this phrase where he says ideas are a multiplier of execution. And I think he's correct, which is that basically you can have a brilliant idea, but if you're terrible at executing, it doesn't matter. You can have an okay idea and have an excellent execution, and you'll be good. And I think that's just generally true. Execution for me breaks into four things. The formula, in case you're wondering, is STEAL, S-T-E-A-L, right? It's time, effort, ability, and luck. That is literally what decides how well you execute. And the questions here are hard and introspective. If we talk about time specifically, how much are you truly willing to sacrifice to make the thing you want to make happen? And again, we can talk about companies, you can talk about your family, you can talk about your relationship, but it's like, how much time are you willing to put into it? Time is the only resource that no matter how much money you have, no matter how much influence, power, control, you can never manufacture time beyond the seconds you have on this planet. You have as many minutes in your day as Beyonce, right? It's not about, you're not going to be able to trick that, but what can you do in those times? So like, how much of it are you willing to give to what? It's a zero-sum trade-off. Me being here means I'm not somewhere else. Very simple. So whenever conference organizers ask, I have to remind them of this occasionally. But Anne was good enough to invite me, and I live in Dublin, so this one's easy. Effort is a really important variable here, and people often conflate effort with time, but it is not the same thing. It is not about the hours you work, it's about the work in your hours. I see people who do the 12-hour day and post 150 tweets, 7 parallel WhatsApp conversations, and they get basically nothing done. But they go home saying that they had an epic day because they did 12 hours and back-to-back, and that's what you got to do. You know, I see other people, and Intercom's full of them. Often, like I've recently become a parent, and I sort of see how it's such a force multiplier for your own productivity. I see other people who work very firm 9 to 5 or 9:30 to 5:30, but they get everything done. They're like a machine in work, and they go home and they've got their job done. And like that is it's an impressive achievement to be able to repel the distractions of the world and maximize the actual outcome you have. There's also ability, and the question here is like in knowledge workers today, which is what I guess we would say we are, are you investing in making yourself a lot better? Are you reading? Are you learning? Are you getting inspiration? Are you getting motivation? Are you really genuinely investing in making yourself better? Because if you don't, your lack of ability will hold you back. And lastly, the thing everyone loves to forget is that you have to be fucking lucky too. And I could give you a dozen different ways Intercom was lucky. We landed at the right time in the market, you might say. Pre-Intercom, we once built a tool called Quitter. Anyone remember Quitter? Quitter told you when somebody stopped following you on Twitter. And no joke, right? And Quitter was unique for one reason, which is that it affected people even if they didn't use the product, you know, because they were like, oh, I just unfollowed you. Oh, how dare you, you know? What was funny about Quitter was it was one of the first uses of the Twitter API back in 2007, 2008. And a guy called Biz Stone liked it. He was one of the co-founders of Twitter. And he invited one of the guys in the team who built it over to Silicon Valley to meet up for a beer. And they had a beer, and they're like, oh, I love your product, it's cool, great stuff, cool to see. It was very much a joke toy. No one thought it was serious, and it wasn't serious. But what was interesting was that Biz Stone went on to put the first 100 grand into Intercom and connected us with other folks in the Valley. And that was lucky. That was undeniably lucky. And I could give you a dozen similar stories. Luck can run in both ways. You know, every other variable here is kind of like 1 to n or whatever. Luck can drag you back as well. You can be horrendously unlucky about things and horrendously lucky, and it's really important to accept that. A lot of times things won't work out for you and you're just plain unlucky. A lot of times things work out for you, and don't think you're a hero. You could have just been lucky. So that's my kind of philosophy on execution, and I share that mostly because I think people generally tend to think it's about hours, or they generally tend to think that it's about maybe like one of these 4 variables, but it's actually the sort of product of all of them. The other side is actually the decisions you make, and I can walk you through some random decisions I made. Here's a question I saw on Twitter recently. No offense, but like, what is the point? Are we just supposed to buy coffee and listen to podcasts until we die? I think boredom is something I've always struggled with, and whenever I found myself bored, it has always been like difficult, and I've always found myself getting more and more dissatisfied, disappointed, slightly depressed maybe, and I've always tried to break a boredom cycle. I've always sort of, someone said to me, it's like, you have a good ability, Des, of breaking yourself out of cycles, and negative cycles destroy you, and you just don't realize it. It's really hard to tell when you're in one, but a negative cycle can be something like, I don't have a lot of confidence, therefore I behave unconfidently, therefore I don't get the results I want, therefore I feel unconfident, therefore, and you keep going, right? And like the first thing I'd say about decisions you make is like, you always have to think about the cycle that you're going to put yourself in. If you are the sort of person who opens Twitter every day and refreshes it 7 times and posts a snarky tweet and then feels great about yourself, realize the negative cycle you're putting yourself in. If you're the sort of person who loves reading gossip because you like being able to criticize people, just realize the cycle you're putting yourself in. Negative cycles are like one of the most destructive things in the decisions you make, and I just think you should always, your best chance when you're in one is to make a decision that breaks you out of it. So, going back to me and how I got here for a second. This is me in school. I'm in the back row there. It doesn't matter where. That's me in Minute. So like the story here goes something like, I went to school, and in school I basically wasn't a great student. I was good enough, but I was really interested in computer science. I went to Minute to study computer science. I then started a PhD, and I found myself in this negative cycle of basically coming into the lab and playing Counter-Strike all day. And legit, no joke, right? Ireland's tax dollars at work. And I just wasn't interested. And then a friend of mine put me on. He said, "Oh, you should start learning like HTML and CSS. This whole web thing is going to take off." So I set up a blog, and that was Traynor.com. I had the original dark mode, right? But like I set up a blog, and because of that blog, I started getting in touch with the Irish blog scene. And then somebody started an open coffee club, which was all the people who work on the internet literally were invited to the Morrison Hotel. That's this is no joke, right? Like there was like 15 of us, and 2 of the people there. One was Owen, who I went on to co-found Intercom with. Another one was a woman called Martha, who worked for Microsoft and was there to try and convince us all that we should use Microsoft technologies. She didn't do that. Unlucky. I did end up dating her. And myself and Owen went on to start a business, and we built this product called Exceptional. And Exceptional is a bug tracker for developer tools. And that little speech bubble in the right-hand corner, that was a way we were going to build to talk to our customers. And that little way to talk to our customers turned out to be way more valuable than the entire product. And it was we started calling it user talk. And then we were like, user talk's a shit name. What should we call it? Well, it's kind of like, when you buzz and you talk into a group of people and they talk back to you. You know what it is? It's an intercom. And that was where Intercom started. So we went to San Francisco and we incorporated, and we went on this whole journey. And to describe the journey, I often use this diagram, which is to say, are there 4 or are there 3 bars here? And the point I make is that it's different when you look back at it, right? It's different when you look back, you see a different thing than when you look forward. And I think that's important to realize. So I don't want to be like hyper preachy about it, but the decisions that I would make consistently that have helped me unlock cycles and actually keep the journey moving has been, I always try to rely on the contingency of progress. And what I mean by that phrase is, even if I'm making the wrong decision here, I'm still moving forward. And as long as you're moving forward, you're moving. And that has been the sole decision I've always obsessed over, which is just this idea of all the paths ahead, which one will move us forward the most. And that principle has guided me for a long, long time. And so that leaves me with this question, which is actually what I ended up when I was ripping on my talk with Anne. This is one of the things we talked about. Like, should people start a company or not? Like, out of curiosity, hands up who's thinking about starting a company. Good. This is Ireland's future here. And my immediate reaction when people ask me is some version of absolutely not, right? And it's not because it's not fun or anything like that, but it's just, I think like most people shouldn't, and that's okay. You know, we don't need like 5 million companies in Ireland because who's going to work in them? But this tweet from Shamas is interesting to me, which is like, there's a courage equation here. It's actually easy to sign incorporation documents. That's not the hard challenge in starting a company. It's easy to register a .ie domain, but I'd advise you to register a .com earlier, or it gets expensive. But the piece is, when you actually make the decision to start, understand that the commitment, if this thing takes off, will be never ending. And it will suck everything out of you, and you'll find yourself in this cycle quite frequently, which is like, is anyone else just going through life thinking, yeah, I just need to get through this week, and next week will be easy, except for it's every week for the rest of your life, right? That is, like, there is a sense there, like, that is what it feels like. There's always a new challenge, there's always a new problem. The other piece I'd say about starting a company is, I bump into a lot of people who, for them, it's like this. It's like, they have all these trinkets that they want to gather in life, and they're pretty sure that when they get some money, and when they get the new job title, and they can update their LinkedIn, and they have a blog, they're going to be happy. Oh no, okay, well then I'm going to make a new hire, I'm going to raise some more money, I'm going to IPO, and then I'll be happy. No. Happiness comes from within. It does not come from the extrinsic trinkets of success. The success feeling that you need is actually inside you, and it's not held in your car or your yacht or anything like it. So, bad reasons to start a company, in case you're out there thinking about it. One is, you will be famous. You won't. I believe it or not, I was able to walk here from the office unencumbered. Ego is a bad reason. Money is probably a bad reason, because most of the time you're not going to make any, and it'll probably just cost you more than it makes you. Control. You might think you have control of your company. Even if you never raise a single dollar, if you have customers, you owe it to them that they control the direction of the company in a lot of ways. Whatever you think you're going to build, your product is ultimately a conversation with the market. They're going to ultimately decide what happens, because their dollars count. Independence is another one. Craft. If you're in love with a discipline, let's say you really love product design, or you really love engineering, and you think if you start a company you'll get to engineer all the time, that's absolutely not true. Bigger problems than engineering are, who's going to take the trash out? Who's going to fix this wall that just fell down? Who's going to work on our compensation philosophy, right? The only reason I really believe people should start a company is if they care about a problem so much that they're willing to do whatever it takes to try and solve it. That's the only reason. It's the only sustainable motivation that will be there. You have to love the problem you're solving, and you have to believe in that higher order thing that you're doing. Because otherwise, one day you're going to find yourself missing design, and you'll be like knee-deep in 15 levels of Excel spreadsheet tabs, trying to work out like what the average rental rate in Singapore is, or something like that, because that's your job today. And the only thing that will make you keep coming back to it is this sense of, I need to solve this problem, because everything else either doesn't exist or dissipates. So you will have this experience where if you're out there thinking about your company, you're like going to find a co-founder, raise a bit of money, mail biz stone, like Des said, all that sort of stuff. And you have this kind of linear idea of what's going to work. And the reality is a lot more like this, right? And that's just the nature of it. So if we go back here, and this last email here is Maureen introducing me to Anne to get me up on stage right now. So we're kind of catching up with the present. I'll tell you what happened in the sort of 7 years in between, but it's all these highs and lows. It started off with the death of my mum. She died in 2012. The whole plan was to be successful for her, in a sense. And only because she never had any money, and if Intercom was successful, I'd have loads, And that was supposed to help, but didn't happen. Life will surprise you. We started Intercom. I mailed, I think, 900 customers in 900 people who I wanted to be customers in 7 days to try, and we got from that we got our first 100 customers. And the funniest discussion I have with founders is, where did Intercom get its first customers? And I say, I mailed 900 people in a week, and they're like, any other ways to do it? And I'm like, you have to care so much you're willing to do whatever. And we had a pitch deck where we raised 6 million, then we raised 23 million. We said we're going to try and build a $1 billion company. We kept going. We raised a Series C. I was still stuck around with Martha. We got proposed. We went to Chicago. We went to Sydney. I got married. Then we announced a new automation product called Operator. And then we had more funding, a bigger valuation. And then Nancy showed up. And then it just keeps going. And and this catches up to literally 2 weeks ago. We just launched Product Tours, and that's been literally everything that's kind of happened in between. And I can just tell you that when I look at all these things, it is different looking back at it, but what I don't want to give you is some sort of A to Z narrative. It's a fucking mess, right? It's a mess, and for me to pretend I knew what I was doing at any stage, I just can't. Not only is it a mess, it's just highs and lows 24/7. We closed $23 million the day my mum got diagnosed with cancer. And you have to process these things at the same time. We closed our Series C on the day one of my best friends decided he was going to leave the company, and that's a professional high and low at the same time. And you're kind of constantly jumping between various psychological states of professional and personal happiness and crises, and it's literally relentless. So you really have to care about doing this, right? So if I was to leave you on just a few ideas, because I'm over time, and Lord knows I hope this has been in some way useful. First is ignore the top tips and the hustle bullshit. Just you do you, and whatever happens is whatever should happen. And if you try to be somebody else or pretend to be somebody else or work like somebody else, it ain't gonna work. Secondly, life is about decisions and executions. If you don't believe me, that's fine, but at least test that hypothesis. I really believe in relying on the contingency of progress. Keep moving forward. Break out of any negative cycles you find yourself in, professionally and personally. If you're in a job where you're not moving forward, you are moving backwards. And know that your success is a combination of your time, your effort, and your ability, and your luck. And all of those things matter, and they all matter to different degrees. And on the last note, I do sternly and solemnly wish you the best of luck. I'm Traynor from Intercom. I hope this has been useful. Thank you.